Chapter 3701. This scene fell into Qiao Yulu's eyes. This caused her eyes to be covered with a layer of sinister coldness. The flames of hatred burned brightly. She gritted her teeth so hard that they broke. How could that bitch Di Luo tame a dragon? That was a dragon. In the entire world, those who had dragons as battle pets could be counted on one hand. Moreover, Qiao Yulu was even sure. Di Luo /S dragon was a few grades higher than the dragon she saw in the Linglong Palace. Her eyes were bloodshot, and her delicate body was trembling uncontrollably. Jealousy was growing in her heart. The auctioneer got up from the ground in disbelief and staggered. His hand trembled as he pointed at the girl in midair. She was so imposing that no one dared to look directly at her. His face was deathly pale like the aura of death. White Fang, stand up. So what if it see dragon? You re an immortal dragon. Compared to it you re more like a dragon. The auctioneer trembled and patted White Fang his body. He had encountered a real dragon. He had no strength to fight back. Just like before when the people from the major forces were swallowed by White Fang and had no strength to fight back. Now this feeling fell on his own body. It was extremely uncomfortable. It was like seeing a lake in an arid desert. After running closer he realized that it was just a mirage. That kind of despair made him want to die. Oh no. He had already died before. He was also a dead man now. No matter how the auctioneer shouted. White Fang was curled up in a corner, shivering and unwilling to budge. The auctioneer felt that he was really isolated and helpless. Relying on the existence of White Fang. He was just one person here. If White Fang didn't cooperate. How could those forces and families that were swallowed by White Fang let him go? He didn't dare to think about the consequences. In fact, he didn't have to think about it. The moment White Fang curled up in the corner, the people from the major forces were already full of joy. Seeing that White Fang had no will to fight at all. Many families that had lost more than half of their elites decisively looked for trouble. Dozens of people surrounded him. Why did you bring that monster to the auction? Why did you block the auction? What is your purpose? Who are you? Why would you do that? Let us out of the auction. At this moment, everyone couldn't wait to leave this damned place. He stayed at the auction for a moment longer. They felt that the danger still existed. However, no matter how they questioned the auctioneer, no matter how cruelly they tried to force the auctioneer did not give any answer. Instead he looked at Yiqing Luo who was standing in midair, looking at him coldly as he laughed out loud. None of you will be able to leave this place. So what if there were real dragons? Don't tell me that dragon can bring you out of this formation? Impossible. Even if the god of heaven were to come, he wouldn't be able to leave. The auctioneer laughed maniacally. Everyone started punching and kicking each other. They did not dare to use their Xian energy. He didn't dare to kill him. The current situation. Only the auctioneer knew what was going on. Looking at the mess of people. Yiqing Luo lowered her eyes slightly. The auctioneer was a corpse puppet. No matter how those people tortured the auctioneer, even if they cut him into pieces. Chapter 3702. Impervious to swords and spears, impervious to fire and water, immortal. Not only that white dragon monster. And the auctioneer. Corpse puppets. In this case her identity had really been exposed. But what made Yiqing Luo curious was, why did those people chase her all the way to the earth boundary? She squinted her long and narrow eyes. She couldn't guess the answer to this question. So she could only let the other party answer. Yiqing Luo patted the green dragon's head lightly. The green dragon spat out a dragon's breath as its body suddenly dived downwards. An overbearing aura came charging towards them. The various powerhouses people swiftly moved away when they sensed the approaching aura. The crowd saw that arrogant green dragon slightly stooped down. The arrogant dragon's head slowly bent down. The young lady's lips curled into a smile as she said, "Thank you," to the green dragon, and with a leap she landed on the ground. At the same time when the young lady stood firmly on the ground, that green dragon's green light suddenly flashed. His colossal body instantly transformed into the same size as the auction house. Step by step it followed closely behind the young lady. The surrounding people unknowingly opened up a path. Even the auctioneer, who was still lying on the ground laughing, subconsciously sat up and looked at her in a daze. But a moment later, Yiqing Luo had already walked in front of the auctioneer. Yiqing Luo stood still as her pink lips rose. I'll give you two choices, either you answer my question or I'll beat you up until you answer my question. When the crowd heard that, their faces were filled with black lines. Simple and violent. No problem at all. The auctioneer looked at the glower flame fan in Yiqing Luo's hands alertly as the smile on his face froze. He took a step back. Yiqing Luo followed closely as she smiled. I know your background and your motive, don't think of lying to me. She moved closer as her 5 fingers moved. The glower flame fan was pressed against the auctioneer's chin. Then she tilted her head and innocently blinked as she laughed lightly. I even have a way to deal with you, don't doubt my words. The auctioneer stiffened as he stared at the glower flame fan on his neck. A sinister glint flashed past his eyes. Who on earth is your boss? What's the motive of locking everyone in the auction? All of this. Is it related to me being here? When Yiqing Luo asked questions, there was a smile in between her brows. But the words he spat out and the tone of his voice, it was so cold that it made people shiver. The auctioneer, who had been surrounded by dozens of people and dealt with all kinds of cruel methods without batting an eyelid, now revealed a horrifying expression. His eyes widened and his neck stiffened. Not answering? So you're choosing the second option? Yiqing Luo's eyes curved. He moved his palm. The devouring flame fan gently slashed open. A dazzling light flashed across the auctioneer's eyes. If you're touched by my glowing flame fan, you won't be able to recover that part of your body no matter what. She chuckled, and the hand holding the glowing flame fan slowly moved downwards through the air. Finally, it stopped 3 inches below the man's navel. She chuckled. However, you shouldn't be too bothered. After all, you're just a dead person. You don't know pain, right? The auctioneer's face turned completely pale. Faster, even if he was a dead man. But as a man, the most important thing can't be lacking, okay? She held a weapon and threatened the man's family jewels. Was this still a young lady? Yiqing Luo had been paying attention to the auctioneer's emotional changes. Looking at the auctioneer's black face. Chapter 3703. The auctioneer's eyes moved. Yiqing Luo continued, answer these 3 answers and I'll let you off. Her voice paused for a moment before she chuckled again. Her voice was very evil. Don't say that I didn't warn you. Once you fail, the person behind you will still appear and take over your task. At that time, I will still know the answer I want. The auctioneer's body tensed up as he heard Yiqing Luo's words. The expression on his face unknowingly had some subtle changes. The next moment he felt a burst of profound energy being released. A ball of excited flame started to burn on the glower flame fan. His body stiffened as he said, I'll speak. I'll speak. The profound strength slowly came to a stop. The young lady's hand, which was holding the glower flame fan, pressed the fan against the auctioneer's chest. Speak. The auctioneer looked at the fan in Yiqing Luo's hand, which was far away from his family jewels, before he heaved a sigh of relief. I also don't know who the master behind me is. My motive for coming here is to send White Teeth to the auction house. As for the reason... He paused as he looked at White Teeth, who was still shivering in fear. The auction will gather all the elites from the 3 main cities. What's more, most of the powerhouses will bring their own elites to the auction to declare their power. His words made everyone's gazes look over. The auctioneer's voice trembled slightly, so they specially set up at the periphery of the auction. Roar. Suddenly, a sharp dragon's roar reverberated through the entire sky. It also forcibly suppressed the auctioneer's voice. When he heard that dragon's roar, the auctioneer's eyes suddenly lit up. His peripheral vision saw the crowd looking towards the direction of the dragon's roar. A glint flashed past his eyes. Suddenly the wind from his palm moved as he struck a palm towards Yiqing Luo's face. Following that, his figure retreated backwards as he rushed towards the direction of White Teeth. Yiqing Luo's vision, although followed the dragon's roar and looked towards that direction. But her own perception and body's instinctive reaction. At the instance when the auctioneer struck, she had already dodged sideways. But the auctioneer had already escaped from her restraints. That White Teeth, who was originally shivering in the corner, had unknowingly raised its head up high. Its huge body began to roll and spin. Before the azure dragon appeared, White Fang did indeed have a trace of a dragon's majesty. However, at this moment the azure dragon was a foil. Even if White Fang had such a huge body, there was no imposing manner to speak of. But in the eyes of the auctioneer, White Fang was their only hope. Yiqing Luo originally wanted to chase after him. But when his gaze touched a certain place, she suddenly stopped in her tracks. The expression on his face also became cold and solemn. When the crowd saw the auctioneer escape, they were eager to chase after him. But when he saw Yiqing Luo bringing the azure dragon, she returned back to Qiao Yinyan and the rest. They didn't understand the meaning of Yiqing Luo's action momentarily. It was during this moment of stupor. All of a sudden, a blood-curdling scream rang out. Everyone saw a scene that made their hair stand on end. The auctioneer, who had been running towards White Fang, stood rooted to the spot. Its huge white teeth bent down slightly and bit the auctioneer's head. Gotcha! His head was bitten into White Fang's mouth. White Fang gave a long roar as it spiraled towards the horizon, stirring the dark clouds in the sky. Chapter 3704. That auctioneer whose head had been bitten off was still standing on the ground as his body kept swaying and his hands kept waving about. He staggered and swayed as he walked forward. There wasn't a single drop of blood on that body. His head had been bitten off by that monster and he was still alive and not bleeding? This was also a monster. Everyone's inner thoughts were in turmoil. They looked at the scene in front of them in shock and fear. On the other side, Yiqing Luo brought the azure dragon as she rushed to the side of Qiao Yinyan and the others. Bo Songyi, Pei Xing and the others were all staring at the azure dragon. Their faces were filled with fear and trepidation. This was their first time seeing a dragon. And the first time they had such close contact with a dragon. Only Qiao Yinyan alone had a congealed expression as he wasn't attracted by the azure dragon at all. Instead he looked at Yiqing Luo and asked, "What's the matter?" Yiqing Luo pursed her lips as she raised her head and looked towards a certain spot in the sky. "Look over there." Qiao Yinyan followed her gaze. Suddenly his pupils dilated. What is that?" Their voices attracted Bo Songyi and Pei Xing's attention. Pei Xing's expression changed slightly when he saw the scene in the sky. Why is there a black hole above?" "Yes. Black hole." A small black hole was gradually enlarging. Bit by bit, it filled the entire sky of the auction. Evil cold yin qi spread across the sky. It was dark and oppressive, making people feel depressed. "What is that?" Qiao Yinyan looked at Yiqing Luo as he asked. Yiqing Luo pursed her lips. "If I didn't see wrongly, it might be an array." This array looked very familiar. Previously in the Nirvana realm she had seen it before. She squinted her eyes slightly. The others also noticed the commotion on their side. When they saw that huge black hole in the sky, all of them cried out in shock. Just at this moment that black hole suddenly expanded. Following that, one after another figures walked out from that black hole. It was as though heavenly soldiers and generals had descended from the sky. Wave after wave they walked out of the black hole and into the auction hall. Rows after rows of people dressed in black robes, looking sinister and treacherous. Just as they walked into the auction, the crowd felt that in the air. There was a chill in the air. Even the air that he breathed in was a bone-chilling cold that made his hair stand on end. A teleportation array? Qiao Yinyan frowned in surprise. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes. Yes. That black hole was indeed a teleportation formation. It was when they were in the Nirvana realm. The Gloomy Palace used this teleportation formation to send over batch after batch of semi-finished corpse puppets. Gloomy Palace. Yiqing Luo's line of sight swept past those rows of figures. With a single glance he saw 3 people floating at the side of the black hole. Her eyes darkened. Yuji Yunyu and Yuhan. It really was them. After the last group of people walked out of the black hole, the black hole slowly disappeared in midair. Yiqing Luo gauged with her eyes. There were at least 200 people who had entered the auction. The 3 people from the Yu family stood at the back of the crowd, hiding their figures. Yiqing Luo also noticed. Standing at the very front of this batch of black-robed men he was also an acquaintance. That man apparently saw Yiqing Luo. A pair of malicious eyes stared fiercely at Yiqing Luo. He raised his hand and made a throat-slitting action. Chapter 3705. She opened her lips slightly as she exchanged glances with that person. Pharaoh he long time no see. The person who stood in front of the crowd as the leader. He was the former pharaoh group of the Dark Forces and the only survivor of the Dark Forces. Pharaoh He. So this was the Dark Forces team led by Pharaoh He? The sudden appearance of a group of black-robed men, and black-robed men who descended from the sky. This aroused the vigilance of various large forces cultivators. One look and you knew that they came with ill intentions. Especially those black-robed men. The evil chi which was emitting made one feel uncomfortable. The two executive elders' expressions changed slightly. They subconsciously looked towards Yiqing Luo. But they saw Yiqing Luo's expression was grave as she lowered her eyes and said something to Qiao Yinyan. The expression on her face was extremely solemn and complicated. The executive elder's heart skipped a beat. Executive elder immediately leaned close to Yiqing Luo. Miss D, those people? Who are they? You know them? I've crossed hands with them before. Yiqing Luo replied calmly and raised her brows. Don't you guys know their identities? Executive elder shook his head. Looked like the secluded palace had only developed their forces in Nirvana realm. The people in the Earth realm didn't know about the secluded palace. The secluded palace had suffered heavy losses in the battle in Nirvana realm. They still had the energy to set their sights on the Earth realm. How big of an obsession did they have with her? Who are they? Were they the ones who set up the array formation that sealed off the auction? That monster is theirs? Executive elder asked with a pale face. Yiqing Luo looked at the valiant and spirited pharaoh He and nodded. The auctioneer should be a bait. These people are the appetizer. But the main course. She squinted her eyes slightly as her gaze swept past the crowd and landed on three nether. Her eyes darkened a little. Yiqing Luo, I didn't expect to meet you here. As though she noticed Yiqing Luo's gaze. Ghost girl walked out from the crowd. She looked at Yiqing Luo with a smile, but the haze between her brows was extremely obvious. Ghost girl's voice broke the silence. Everyone looked toward Ghost girl's line of sight at the same time. Yiqing Luo? Who is Yiqing Luo? But when everyone's vision was fixed on Yiqing Luo, they were all stunned. Isn't this girl called Di Luo? However, looking at Misty's expression, it seemed as though the Yiqing Luo, which was mentioned by that black-robed cold lady, was that Di Luo. Yu Nu continued to look at her with a smile. We're old friends, shouldn't you greet me? As soon as he said that, the crowd immediately burst into an uproar. Even Bo Songyi unconsciously led his 10 over mercenary brothers to retreat a few steps away from Yiqing Luo. This group of black-robed men in front of him. It was obviously targeted at them. It was very likely that he was the instigator of the current situation. This bunch of people and that lady called Yiqing Luo were old friends? Didn't that mean they were in cahoots? The crowd immediately thought of what Xiao Yulu had told them earlier. All these were planned by Yiqing Luo. The white dragon was related to her. The ceiling formation was related to her. Was she deliberately allying with external forces to weaken the strength of the land? Seeing that everyone was already suspicious of Yiqing Luo. Chapter 3706. Xiao Yulu pointed at Yiqing Luo and laughed. What I said is right. She has ulterior motives. All these are orchestrated by her. As Xiao Yulu spoke, she walked out and pointed at Yiqing Luo as she continued with a sneer. This person appeared out of thin air and advanced step by step, all for today's plot. Xiao Yulu's accusation made everyone even more suspicious of Yiqing Luo. Seems like it's true. If she doesn't have a guilty conscience, why would she hide her name? Lie to us? Moreover, she obviously knows that group of people. That group of people could possibly be the force behind her. Intentionally trapping us here, what's her motive? All of us have been cheated by her. Someone asked Qiao Yinyan, eldest young master Qiao, I'm afraid even you don't know her real identity. She hid her name and lurked beside you, so she must be trying to make a move on you. I find it strange. I've clearly never heard of this woman before. So how did she suddenly become known to everyone in Without Embroiling City? All sorts of discussions were going on. The way they looked at Yiqing Luo. They totally treated Yiqing Luo and that group of black-robed men who descended from the sky as a group of people. At this time, these people had already experienced wave after wave of horror and then joy. Their minds had already suffered a serious blow. Listening to those discussions, Pei Xing's face turned red from anxiety. He opened his mouth and wanted to refute those people's words. But before he could open his mouth, He was suppressed by the questions that came from all directions. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes slightly. Her line of sight was still on Ghost Girl's face. Ghost Girl's victorious smile was still hanging on her face and had not faded. Apparently, Ghost Girl did it on purpose. 3 people make a tiger. As long as she incited everyone to not believe Yiqing Luo's words, those gossips would be able to crush Yiqing Luo. No matter how capable Yiqing Luo was, there was absolutely no way to turn the tables in today's plan. At this juncture, no matter how Yiqing Luo explained, no one would believe her. Even if Yiqing Luo was really clean, she couldn't explain it. The more Yiqing Luo explained, the more suspicious it would be. Yu Nu delightfully raised her lips, wanting to see Yiqing Luo's flustered look. However, what she saw was that the young girl's expression did not change in the slightest. Nether girl. The girl's voice was clear and light. Her tone was calm and without any fluctuation. You're just a bunch of rats. Do you think you're worthy of calling me old friends? Don't try to climb up to me, Yiqing Luo. Her tone was calm. However, the arrogance in his words was shocking. Even Ghost Maiden's expression changed. You're still quibbling. Xiao Yulu naturally refused to give Yiqing Luo any chance to explain. Don't think that by saying this you can make everyone believe you. Yiqing Luo sneered as she retorted impolitely, do you think that everyone is like you, a fool? Xiao Yulu gritted her teeth. Yiqing Luo's smile gradually turned cold. Her eyes, which were like the first snow that had melted, swept past the crowd indifferently. Whether you believe me or not, or whatever thoughts you have, I don't care. I'll only say this once: if you want to leave this place alive, don't create trouble for me. Chapter 3707. The young lady's voice was clear and calm. His voice was indifferent, and not a hint of emotion could be heard from it. But there was an indescribable feeling of pressure from the bottom of one's heart. Obviously they were being ridiculed and insulted. But on seeing the young lady's eyes, an icy cold glint revolved. Her chilly gaze swept past everyone's line of sight. Countless anger in their hearts were suppressed. But there was one person who was an exception. For example, what do you mean don't give you trouble? Di Luo. No, I should call you Yiqing Luo now. You even hide your own name, how dare you talk big? Xiao Yulu's face flushed red, turning purple. Her gaze turned cold as she continued. From what I see, you are just putting on an act in order to let your plan go smoothly. A person like you, full of lies. Her voice paused as she looked at Xiao Yinyan. Brother, did you see that? This is the woman you have always believed in. She had been lying to you right from the start. She is. I know. Xiao Yinyan's clear voice interrupted Xiao Yulu's words. Xiao Yulu was stunned. You know what? I know, her name is Yiqing Luo. Xiao Yinyan's expression was calm as he replied calmly. Xiao Yulu's pupils suddenly widened. The meaning was, Yiqing Luo didn't lie to him, nor did she hide her identity? No. Impossible. That woman was a liar. Xiao Yulu was shocked. Hearing this sentence, Yiqing Luo also got a shock. What did Xiao Yinyan's words? Knew she was Yiqing Luo? Was it to help her out of trouble? But even if she had doubts now, it wasn't a good time to ask. Yiqing Luo only took a glance at Xiao Yulu. In her eyes, at best, Xiao Yulu was just a clown. What she was more concerned about was the reason why 3 Nether and the Dark Forces came to the Earth Realm. The current Palace of Darkness should still be recuperating. But they dealt with the Earth Realm in such an ostentatious manner, setting up such a huge game of chess. It was really hard for her not to think too much. Yiqing Luo, you're really cruel. Yu Nu chuckled softly. In any case, we fought a battle of life and death. We can be considered as people who have experienced life and death together. Do you really have the heart to treat me like this? Yiqing Luo's expression didn't change. You're mistaken, it's me who one-sidedly tortured you, and it's also you who one-sidedly almost lost your life. So we can't be considered as people who have experienced life and death together. She paused, then continued. We're both women. Don't use your honey trap on me. Yu Nu sighed and glanced sideways at the 2 people beside her. That's why I said that I should have let you go from the start. This sentence of yours isn't right either. Yiqing Luo continued to be indifferent. The both of them are too ugly. Using the beauty trap would only hurt the eyes. Ugly, ugly. Although the silence and coldness could not be considered as a peerless beauty. But it was definitely not ugly, right? Yuji and Yuhan's faces instantly darkened. The ghost girl covered her mouth and smiled delicately. However, her beautiful eyes were filled with an eerie coldness. She suddenly raised her hand. Her dark red nails seemed as though her hand was stained with fresh blood, which was strange and alluring. She laughed softly. Since you're so against being friends with me then, you can't blame us for disregarding our past relationship. The moment her hand straightened. Roar. A dragon's roar rang from the horizon. Chapter 3708. That white head coiled around Ghost Maiden's outstretched hand. Ghost Maiden saw the broken dragon horn on White Tooth's head. The expression on her face turned slightly cold. She raised her hand and caressed White Tooth's head. White Tooth gave a low howl as though he was acting coquettishly. This scene made everyone understand what was going on. This monster. It wasn't the auctioneer's battle pet. It was the lady named Ghost Maiden's battle pet. Who were they? Everyone shifted their gaze towards Yiqing Luo. They were still hesitating about Yiqing Luo's relationship with those people. Everyone, don't be deceived by their tricks. Executive Elder cleared his throat. No matter what Miss Yiqing Luo's name is, but I firmly believe and dare to use my reputation as Executive Elder to guarantee that she absolutely has no intention to harm anyone. On the contrary, the other party time and time again trying to create public opinion to break down our trust towards Miss Yiqing Luo, but it made me believe in Miss Yiqing Luo even more. Executive Elder had been the closest to Yiqing Luo. The both of them could hear Yiqing Luo's conversation with the people beside her. From Yiqing Luo's performance from the start. And the conversation with Qiao Yinyan and the rest. Adding on to the fact that when the monster attacked everyone earlier, she blocked it and summoned the green dragon to suppress that monster. Whether a person was innocent. When a person does something, does he or she have another goal in mind? No matter how good the disguise was, there would still be flaws. Executive Elder believed that Yiqing Luo and the other party were absolutely not accomplices. Executive Elder's words made everyone's wavering hearts start to float again. Qiao Yilu was so angry that she almost bit her teeth off. Why did someone always stand on that slut's side? She was obviously without Embroiling City's mysterious maiden. She was the one with the most distinguished status. A bunch of ignorant people. Qiao Yilu clenched her fists tightly. The back of her slender hands were covered with green veins. Her bloodshot eyes were filled with jealousy as she looked towards the direction of Ghost Maiden and the rest. In her heart, a decision was slowly formed. Perhaps she felt Qiao Yilu's gaze. That Ghost Maiden who was caressing her white teeth curled her lips as she laughed sinisterly. On the account that everyone wants to leave the auction, I shall give everyone a chance to leave. Everyone immediately looked at her. Netherworld Girl curled her lips and spoke in a gentle voice that was filled with bewitchment. Join our Palace of Darkness. As long as you leave your current forces and join the Palace of Darkness, you will be able to leave the auction. Serene Girl's words caused the crowd's expression to freeze. Yiqing Luo's eyes dimmed as her slender brows creased tightly as she looked at Spectral Girl. She was trying to poach him. Was there anyone who would poach someone so openly? Moreover, he was able to participate in the annual auction. Which one of them didn't come from a famous force? Most of them might not have heard of Gloomy Palace. Let them break away from their current power. Join a force that I've never heard of? And using such a despicable method. Anyone with a bit of backbone wouldn't listen to him. I'll join. Just as everyone was expressing their unyielding spirit in their hearts, a voice suddenly rang out. A clear voice suddenly rang out. He looked in the direction of the voice. Everyone saw Qiao Yilu flying in the direction of the ghost girl. Chapter 3709. The crowd was in an uproar. How did this Palace of Darkness appear? Why haven't I heard of it before? The Empyrean Lady of Without Embroiling City gave up her status as the Empyrean Lady and joined the Palace of Gloomy Darkness? Not only is she the Empyrean Fairy of Without Embroiling City, but she's also the first young miss of Without Embroiling City's Qiao family. Is she really going to give up all of that? Did you see how close that monster was to them? This means that the reason we're trapped in the auction is because of them. They want our lives and want us to join their *T Dark Palace? Just now, because of White Fong's savagery, the scene of it devouring a large number of profound practitioners. This group of people was the culprit behind everything. How could the crowd give them any face? However, just as everyone was talking about it, there was no hesitation in Xiao Yulu's footsteps. "Ha! Empyrean maiden, I'll prove that you've made the right choice." The dark woman curled her red lips tenderly and hooked her finger at Xiao Yulu. It looked as if it was summoning its little pet. However, Xiao Yulu stepped forward obediently. She stared at Yunu and said word by word, "My only condition for joining the Palace of Gloomy Darkness is, I want to kill that woman with my own hands." "No problem," Yunu answered straightforwardly. The corners of Xiao Yulu's mouth curled up into a sinister sneer. It could be seen that this group of people was extremely powerful. Now the executive elder had already stood on Yiqing Luo's side. Whatever she said was of no use. Moreover, sooner or later someone would find out that this dragon egg was indeed brought to the auction house by her. She had been used by this so-called Palace of Gloomy Darkness. This also meant that she was already black. Joining the Gloomy Palace was her only option. The only one. The way to survive and kill Yiqing Luo with his own hands. Because she and the Palace of Gloomy Darkness had a common enemy. What about you guys? Those who want to join the Palace of Gloomy Darkness should hurry up, there will be a limit to the number of people who can join. Yunu looked at the crowd with a smile. The feminine voice was filled with a chill that made one's body tremble. Everyone snorted disdainfully. Evidently they didn't take you seriously at all. From the looks of it, all of you don't want to leave this place. All of you want to become White Fang's food. Yunu wasn't angry. She gently stroked her lips with her dark red fingers and said with a smile, "Then don't blame the Palace of Darkness for not giving you a chance to live." The executive elder's face darkened as he listened to Ghost Girl's arrogant words. He took a look at the calm-looking Yiqing Luo and subsequently looked at Yunu, cruel and bloody, indiscriminately killing the innocent heretical sect. "You still want to instigate us? What's your goal? Aren't you afraid that we'll join forces with our families to deal with you after we leave the auction?" In the eyes of the executive elder and the profound practitioners of the various forces, this so-called Palace of Gloomy Darkness was just a new small force. The dark woman chuckled when she heard this. Jiao Jiao's gentle laughter was accompanied by a trace of sinister treachery. "That's if you can walk out of the auction alive, isn't it?" She met the executive elder's gaze as she gave a tender smile. "But those who are unwilling to join the Palace of Gloomy Darkness can only die here, forever unable to walk out of the auction." That arrogant words and ridiculing attitude made everyone's heart surge with rage. "You don't believe me? Then let's kill the chicken to warn the monkey." Yunu's fingers caressed White Fang by the side of her body. As her voice fell, White Fang roared as it spiraled and surged. Powerful air currents were released from their bodies, which condensed into blades and frantically attacked the people in front of them. Help. Monster. They are all monsters. These are all monsters. The profound practitioners who were originally filled with confidence to kill all of these people before them were now fleeing in all directions in fright. However, their speed simply couldn't compare to White Fang and the black-robed men. "Those who don't can only die. If you want to live, join the Palace of Gloomy Darkness." Ghost Girl's light and spirited laughter bewitched all the profound practitioners present. "We can also modify all of you to become like these puppets of mine. We can give all of you bodies that are impervious to all weapons and impervious to fire and water." The blood of the profound practitioners dyed the ground red. As his white teeth moved, he swallowed a profound practitioner into his stomach. Dark clouds rolled, lightning flashed, and thunder roared. Chapter 37:11. Yi Miss Yi. Executive Elder Old B's face turned pale as he called out Yiqing Luo's name in a trembling voice. That bunch of monsters. There was no way to deal with them, even if they had the numbers and were willing to unite. But there was no way they could defeat those undying monsters. Their attacks towards that bunch of monsters were totally unable to cause any damage at all. What should they do? Executive Elder subconsciously placed all his hopes on Yiqing Luo. The scene in front of her made Yiqing Luo's pupils turn wretched. Her long and narrow eyes slowly filled with an austere cold intent. Her pitch-black pupils seemed to be covered with frost. Her slender brows creased tightly. She had not expected Yunu to make a move just like that. Moreover, it was done in such a straightforward manner, totally not giving these people any chance to hesitate at all. From the looks of it, They really intended to capture all the various powerhouses elites from the various main cities in the Earth domain in one fell swoop. This carried on. It was merely the time for half an incense stick to burn. The people here would be forced to death by this atmosphere first. Yiqing Luo's eyes narrowed as a burst of fiery profound energy shot out from her fingertips. Just as the profound energy charged into mid-air. In an instant, like a volcano eruption, it exploded with a loud bang. Immediately following that, the sky was filled with fire clouds as intense chi waves circulated in the air, blocking the surging white fangs and black-robed men. Yunu's brows rose. Seeing Yiqing Luo making a move, her feminine lips curled upwards as she laughed. Yiqing Luo, do you think you can stop me? Following her ending words. Yunu raised her hand as her palm landed on Xiao Yulu's shoulder. Xiao Yulu cried out miserably as she spat out a large mouthful of blood. Immediately following that, boundless yin qi entered Xiao Yulu's body. Xiao Yulu's body kept twisting and struggling under the black qi as she cried out miserably in pain. Immediately following that, when Xiao Yulu absorbed all the yin qi into her body, Yunu's palm pushed Xiao Yulu towards Yiqing Luo's direction. Since you want to join secluded palace then, show your sincerity. Xiao Yulu's body was like an arrow that had left the bow as it shot towards Yiqing Luo. Right in front of him was a violent surge of profound energy mixed with a yin energy that caused one's entire body to tremble. Yiqing Luo commanded Azure Dragon to stop White Fang's fake dragon from continuing to devour humans. Then he faced Xiao Yulu's attack and directly counterattacked. The two forces collided. An explosive sound suddenly erupted in the air. In all directions, the air waves of profound strength were set off like rolling waves. The surging air waves were like sharp blades, cutting across the skin on his face. Yiqing Luo's expression was calm as she fiercely passed through the surging qi waves. As his profound energy surged, the gourd flame fan in his hands had already shot out a strong profound energy. Oh! Xiao Yulu was hit in the chest by the wind blade. She let out a muffled groan as her body flew backward. Yiqing Luo closed her glower flame fan as her gaze swept towards the direction of Azure Dragon. Under Azure Dragon's attack, White Fang was no longer as ostentatious as before. His entire body was cut into pieces by the Azure Dragon's sharp claws. White Fang, on the other hand, seemed to know no exhaustion and continued to tangle with the Azure Dragon without hesitation. Seemed like the Azure Dragon had the upper hand. But, somehow something felt amiss. Yiqing Luo's brows creased into a bundle as she stared deadly at the Azure Dragon. She was about to head towards the Azure Dragon's side to settle White Fang first. But she was blocked by a gust of strong wind. Di Luo, no Yiqing Luo. Chapter 37:12. Motherf Asterisker. Yiqing Luo's heart was about to explode. Wasn't this girl annoying? Yiqing Luo took a step back to avoid Xiao Yulu's attack. Xiao Yulu, you've been used by them once or twice, haven't you learnt your lesson? Do you really think that you'll be able to survive after they've wiped out all the profound practitioners from the various powers? I don't know if you can survive or not, but what I can confirm is that you will definitely die. Xiao Yulu pressed on. On that beautiful face, her eyelashes cast a black arc under her eyes. Wisps of black aura like ink spread out in her eyes. It made her look extremely gloomy. This was the sign of yin qi entering the body. Yiqing Luo frowned. This Xiao Yulu's hatred towards her was a little scary. In order to kill her, she didn't hesitate to abandon her identity as mysterious maiden and chose to join the secluded palace, willingly to be used by others. Yiqing Luo really didn't understand which class this thinking was for. Anyway, she felt that Xiao Yulu could no longer be described with the words silly or stupid. Otherwise, it would be an insult to these words. Yiqing Luo was entangled by Xiao Yulu. The black-robed man's attack didn't stop. Xiao Yinyan looked at the horizon at the two figures fighting, and that bloody and horrifying scene around them. His expression was cold as he pursed his lips and looked at Pei Xing. The situation is critical now. I'm afraid it's not realistic to rely on Luo alone. We can't stand by and watch anymore. Follow me closely. Luo She won't. Pei Xing's pupils contracted, his hands clenched into fists as he asked worriedly. Xiao Yinyan took a look at the apparently crazy Xiao Yulu, his face sunk. Luo's ability is far beyond our imagination. What we need to do now is to protect ourselves, not to be a burden to her. Those monsters, other than Yiqing Luo's weapon. These people were unable to deal with those monsters. They couldn't resist, which meant that they could only passively accept those monsters' attacks. If this went on, even if they had the advantage in numbers, they would immediately be at a disadvantage. Gather everyone and work together. The executive elder and Xiao Yinyan thought of the same thing. In order to prevent more profound practitioners from being sacrificed, they had to take relative measures. Even if he couldn't deal with those monsters, at the very least he had to stop them from committing murder. Yes. No matter what, we have to control our casualties first. There are a few hundred of us. Why should we be afraid of these monsters? We are elites from the various major cities and major factions. I can't die here. We can't let these monsters achieve their goal. Everyone's eyes were burning with passion. One by one they released their dark force, fighting with their lives to suppress the other party. The dazzling dark force was extremely eye-catching in the midst of Yin Qi. The surging waves of dark force enveloped the entire auction, with order delaying the monsters. The rate of casualties had indeed slowed down a lot. Both sides refused to back down and continued to resist the monsters' attacks. The dark force that filled the sky intertwined with the cause field. Under the saber light and sword shadow, the imposing manner was majestic like a rainbow. After Yiqing Luo and Xiao Yulu crossed hands for more than 10 rounds, her expression sunk as she took a few steps back. He didn't know if it was an illusion. Xiao Yulu's current state was that the more she fought, the braver she became. As though she didn't know pain and exhaustion. The current Xiao Yulu should still be in a human body and had not gone through the transformation of a corpse puppet. Chapter 37:13. She originally wanted to settle Xiao Yulu quickly. Then to help Azure Dragon settle that white-toothed monster. The array that was set up around the auction. Yiqing Luo could clearly feel the dense yin qi coming from all directions. If they stayed in this array for a period of time, it would have a huge impact on them. There was a possibility that it might even weaken their powers, causing the yin qi to enter their bodies. In Nirvana Realm's Nether Palace's territory, when Yiqing Luo was sealed in the palace by the mastermind, her body was almost corroded by the Nether Palace's yin qi. If her willpower was weak, there was a possibility that she would become Nether Palace's puppet, controlled by them. What was even more unfortunate was that her body and mind were swallowed by the yin qi directly. Like Xiao Yulu. Obviously after the yin qi entered her body she had lost her own rationality. But Xiao Yulu's attacks were getting fiercer and fiercer as she fought. It really made Yiqing Luo shocked. Somehow, he seemed to have forgotten something. Just like she felt that Xiao Yulu's attacks looked as though she was trying her best to kill her. But Yiqing Luo had an ominous premonition in her heart. As though Nether Palace had specially made use of Xiao Yulu to delay her time? Wait a minute. Delay time? Yiqing Luo's pupils suddenly widened. The expression on her face congealed. Her deep and enchanting eyes looked in the direction of the Azure Dragon in shock. Azure Dragon. Her throat was only able to spit out 2 words. But the scene in front of her silenced all her voices. Black chi filled the air as though a thick fog had dyed the sky. That imitation white dragon monster, under Azure Dragon's tearing, its huge dragon body had already broken into pieces. But White Fang, who was supporting his broken body, emitted a dense black aura. Mixed with the rolling dark clouds and lightning. Layers and layers of it entangled Azure Dragon. White Tooth's injuries were more serious. The surrounding black chi became thicker and deeper. It could be said. The Azure Dragon was completely bound by this massive black chi. This was White Tooth's motive. Yiqing Luo finally understood. Earlier when Azure Dragon obviously had the upper hand, why was her heart beating so fast? At the time she did not realize this. Damn it! How dare they plot against Azure Dragon? Yiqing Luo's charming eyes were filled with a chilly killing intent. Powerful and thick profound energy surged out from his body. Her fingertips twitched. The devouring flame fan in his hand unleashed a powerful pressure. Kicked up a huge hurricane and headed straight for the Azure Dragon. Yiqing Luo. Xiao Yulu gave a cold harumph as she once again entangled Yiqing Luo crazily. Yiqing Luo's entire mind was occupied by the green dragon. Without any hesitation she waved her palm and shot out a stream of profound qi. The surrounding air waves surged and twisted. It formed an invisible wave that forced Xiao Yulu back. Yiqing Luo leapt up and charged towards the green dragon. "Don't come any closer." The azure dragon's hoarse voice rang out in his mind. His voice was filled with suppressed pain. How could it not be painful? The azure dragon was the leader of the 4 great sacred beasts, a righteous sacred beast. He had just woken up not long ago, and because he had formed a blood contract with her, his strength had yet to recover. Furthermore, he was suppressed by the realm and the contract. While he was being entangled by White Tooth's evil qi, it was as if its soul and psychic power were being entangled by the evil energy. Father. Shiju couldn't sit still in the pet space. Chapter 37:14. Yiqing Luo knitted her brows tightly. She understood Azure Dragon's meaning. White Fang was specially used by Nether Palace to plot against Azure Dragon. It was intentionally used to bait her. If she went over rashly, that would be in line with Nether Palace's intentions. But to just leave Azure Dragon like that, how could she possibly do it? Yiqing Luo, do you despise me so much? How dare you be distracted? She heard Xiao Yulu's haunting voice ringing in her ears. Mixed with it was an attack filled with murderous intent. Yiqing Luo was feeling frustrated. Anger surged in her heart. There was also a vicious killing intent spreading in his chest. She frowned as her fingertips flipped. The glower flame fan in her hands opened up, drawing a biting cold wind blade arc, clashing against Xiao Yulu's attack. She pursed her lips as her eyes gradually turned red. Bam bam bam. A deafening explosion resounded. As the profound energy clashed, the surrounding buildings were all blasted into pieces as rubble flew everywhere. Xiao Yulu was struck right in the middle as she flew backwards. Her soft body crashed heavily onto a building. Blood spurted out from her mouth. Xiao Yulu cried out miserably as she fell onto the ground. Her internal organs seemed as though they were about to gush out from her mouth. This scene made Yiqing Luo subconsciously raised her hand and pressed against her own chest. The redness under her eyes deepened. She knew that this was the sign of evil qi entering the body. This evil qi was interfering with her emotions. The more easily angered, the more frustrated she was, the more evil qi could seep into one's heart. Yiqing Luo's eyes darkened as she took a deep breath, suppressing the various emotions in her heart. Her figure flashed as she speedily headed towards Azure Dragon's direction. Profound energy burst forth as the glower flame fan on her fingertips was also burning with raging flames. The alluring red glow instantly covered that patch of black qi which was emitted from the white fang. Black and red intertwined. Like the black smoke as cold blood seeped out. Azure Dragon didn't expect Yiqing Luo to rush over. An indescribable feeling arose in its heart. Yiqing Luo's eyes darkened as her long and narrow eyes outlined a seductive cold arc, appearing extremely evil. Her black hair fluttered in the wind and her red clothes fluttered. The profound energy in her entire body surged even more violently. His entire person was like a blood-colored firework blooming bit by bit. Since you have signed a contract with me, you are my companion. How can I just watch my comrade fight alone? The girl's sonorous voice was firm and without the slightest hesitation. Then the dazzling dark light around the young girl suddenly blossomed with a whoosh. In an instant the Azure Dragon and White Fang were completely covered. Roar! White Fang roared in pain. Under the pain his broken body kept twitching and twisting. Even the dense black aura was devoured by the waves of raging flames. This scene caused the expression of San Yu, who was originally watching by the side, to darken. Yuji frowned. White Fang was in the first batch of battle pets. Her weapon shouldn't have been able to kill White Fang. She can even purify White Fang's evil yin qi. Yunu's eyes widened in shock. Yu Han hugged Yunu's slender waist tightly as her expression was icy cold. This is different from the results of the investigation. We must start from her weapon. Wait. Yunu suddenly covered her mouth as she cried out in shock. Look at her weapon. Yuji and Yu Han immediately looked towards the direction of the voice. They saw the sky full of black fog and under the red glow. Chapter 37:15. A flickering light aura flashed on the glowing flame fan. The surging profound energy lingered on the gourd flame fan. It caused her figure that was red like the blazing sun to seem like a pure and elegant poppy. Countless wind blades circled around the girl's body in a frenzy. Her weapon evolved. An evolvable artifact. Triple Nether exclaimed in astonishment. They had not expected that the glower flame fan in Yiqing Luo's hands could actually evolve at this juncture. The evolution of the weapon was equivalent to the evolution of the whole body. Even the mental energy within the gourd flame fan, which had been refined with the divine power of the netherworld, had evolved. Therefore, when dealing with a battle pet like White Fang, the evolved spirit would cover up White Fang's own evil aura. Yunu's beautiful eyes dimmed a little. She bit her red lips with a trace of resentment in her eyes. That slut, she was really damn lucky. At a time like this, her weapon could still evolve. However, Dark Girl's eyes gradually darkened. A faint black aura leaked out from between his brows. So what if it evolved? Today they had made all the necessary preparations. He would definitely get rid of that slut here. On the other side, Yiqing Luo had also sensed the surging energy from the glower flame fan. She quickly dispersed the black fog that enveloped the azure dragon and slashed a wind blade at White Fang. White Fang roared and tried to break free. But Yiqing Luo's attacks were swift and fierce. White Fang was cut in half at the waist. After the dragon's head was separated from its body, it fell limply to the ground. The two parts of its huge body kept wriggling. However, he was unable to reconnect the two halves of his body. The black mist slowly dispersed. The azure dragon's slightly tired head was revealed. Yiqing Luo looked towards Xiao Yulu's direction. Xiao Yulu was lying on the spot where she had fallen, her body arched as if she was in so much pain that she couldn't stand up. She retracted her gaze and sped up to purify the evil aura around the azure dragon. Father. Suddenly, the clear voice of a child rang in his ears. Yiqing Luo felt a tightness in her chest. Shiju actually forcefully scurried out from the pet space. The palm-sized ball pounced towards the azure dragon. Shiju. Come back. Jean, don't come over. Yiqing Luo's pupils suddenly widened as she cried out anxiously. The azure dragon's voice rang out. But it was too late for Yiqing Luo to stop him. Thick black fog covered Shiju's body in a split second. The dragon head that was originally lying on the ground and ceaselessly curled up suddenly leaped up and opened its mouth to swallow Shiju into its stomach. Shiju. Yiqing Luo's hand caught empty air. With a backhand punch, she heavily smashed White Fang's head. White Fang's head smashed onto the ground and bounced a few times. Spit out, Shiju. Yiqing Luo stepped on Bai Ye's head as she shouted sternly. White Tooth played dead. Jean, Azure Dragon was flustered and his eyes widened. The black mist around its body also surged wildly due to the change in its mood. The azure dragon immediately let out a muffled groan as it was entangled. Its whiskers shook and its green dragon scales turned into streaks of light. It desperately tried to break free from the entanglement of the evil Yin energy. Yiqing Luo comforted the azure dragon in her heart. Her long and narrow eyes were suffused with an icy chill. She stepped hard on Bai Ye's head a few times. Yiqing Luo, if you don't listen to me obediently, the sword will not have eyes. Just at this moment, a soft voice was transmitted into Yiqing Luo's ears. There was an obvious sense of pride in that voice. Yiqing Luo's heart trembled. Chapter 37:16. Among the black-robed men, the leader held a man in his hand and a sharp blade was pressed against the man's neck. The man's handsome face was steely green as his eyes were filled with anger. After meeting Yiqing Luo's gaze, he instantly turned guilty. Ah Sheng. Yiqing Luo's pupils contracted as she looked at the man who was restrained and called out softly. I'm sorry. Pei Xing apologized softly. This bunch of black-robed men were simply too sinister. Earlier when Shiju appeared and was swallowed by White Tooth, it made him place all his attention on Yiqing Luo. Momentarily he neglected the approaching pharaoh his own mistake. He actually became all Luo's burden. Pei Xing did not feel good in his heart. Pharaoh he chose him as a tool to threaten Aluo. It was because he was too weak. If he was slightly stronger, the other party wouldn't have this chance. He wouldn't become Aluo's burden. The more he thought, the more guilty Pei Xing felt. Tsk. Pharaoh he laughed coldly. Yiqing Luo, so what if your luck is good? Your only shortcoming is that you're too soft-hearted. I want to see if your life is more important or your little brother's life is more important. As Pharaoh he said that, he held Pei Xing's neck tightly. His face was filled with a complacent smile. Pei Xing's features contorted in pain as he tried to struggle but was trapped even tighter. Yiqing Luo's eyes darkened. Her slender fingers clenched into a fist as her brows overflowed with a chilly intent. Despicable. Pharaoh actually used Pei Xing to threaten her. Don't bother about me. Luo, don't bother. Pei Xing screamed. Suddenly Pharaoh he's blade grazed Pei Xing's neck. Pei Xing drew in a cold breath from the pain as he grimaced in pain, unable to open his mouth. Yiqing Luo's eyes darkened as she stared coldly at Pharaoh he, you'd better control your hand. If you hurt him again you can try to see if you can still use him to threaten me. Pharaoh he's hand trembled as the expression on his face turned stiff. He suppressed the fear in his heart as he shouted at Yiqing Luo, stand aside obediently. Yiqing Luo's eyes were gloomy as she clenched her fingers tightly. His knuckles were pale from the strength of his grip. Roar, the azure dragon gradually revealed itself in the black fog. He opened his eyes wide and stared at White Fang's head, his dragon breath surging. At this moment Yiqing Luo was in a dilemma. On the other side was Pei Xing. On one side was Shiju. If she didn't move, what would happen to Shiju after it was swallowed by White Fang? White Fang's body was filled with evil energy. Could Shiju's small body withstand it? If they moved, Pharaoh he would definitely not hesitate to take Pei Xing's life. Since she had promised to help Pei Xing, she would definitely help him to the end. If Pei Xing lost his life because of this, she would feel guilty. Also, the profounders from the various powers in the surroundings. They were all waiting for a chance to leave the auction. What to do? Yiqing Luo's complexion was pale and her tightly pursed pink lips were trembling slightly. Luo, behind you. Suddenly he heard Xiao Yinyan's panicked voice. There were a few figures who were rushing towards her at high speed. Yiqing Luo's brows twitched as she was just about to move. But Yu laughed faintly, be obedient and don't move. If you alarm Pharaoh he and his hand trembles. That would be bad. Chapter 37:17. Two light and indifferent sentences. It made Yiqing Luo's body which wanted to dodge suddenly froze. In the next instant, a ferocious gust of wind from a palm landed heavily on her back. Yiqing Luo only felt a wave of intense pain as her internal organs churned. Her body staggered a few steps forward. Blood spilled out from the corner of her mouth. She coughed violently as she covered her mouth. Luo. Difu. Misty. Miss Yi. The surrounding crowd cried out in shock. Yiqing Luo, you're just so. While the crowd was worried, they were discussing in whispers. Qiao Yulu's voice was very obvious. Qiao Yulu looked complacently at Yiqing Luo, who was spitting out blood as she finally felt much better. What a ridiculous brotherly relationship. Since you want to use your life to exchange for that trash's life, then I shall fulfill your wish. Qiao Yulu sneered as her lips twitched. Following that, she flipped her palm and attacked towards Yiqing Luo's direction. Her attack was extremely fast, totally not giving Yiqing Luo any chance to breathe. Yiqing Luo clutched her chest as it was in extreme pain. Even the slightest movement of his body would cause his internal organs to feel a sharp pain as if they were being torn apart. Qiao Yulu's attack made her face turn paler. She couldn't dodge. She couldn't resist. Was Yu doing this on purpose, trying to torture her in this way? Seeing Qiao Yulu's attack getting closer, the worried growls and Yu's complacent voice continued, none of you move. Whoever dares to stop me, this lad is dead. When Xiao Yinyan and the rest heard this, they wanted to go up to stop her, but they were all rooted to the ground as their eyes were filled with hesitation. F***K. I don't care if he dies or not. You bunch of trash, how dare you touch my people, I will skin you alive. Old Lai didn't have the patience to think so much. He was only concerned about Yiqing Luo alone. Gathering treasures and being amiable, that was on account of Yiqing Luo. Especially now, that bunch of people from secluded palace were old enemies. Seeing them, Old Lai had the intention to kill them. How could he possibly calm down? Old Lai's rage only lasted for a short moment. The biting cold profound energy which Qiao Yulu was brewing had already attacked towards Yiqing Luo's face. Pei Xing's pupils constricted. Suddenly, an extremely dazzling golden light erupted from his eyes. He stared at Yiqing Luo's direction. There seemed to be some kind of anger in his heart that kept surging. It was all because of him. It was all because of him. Aluo was threatened by others. Aluo was injured. Obviously they wanted to use this method to torture Aluo. He could not stand by and watch Aluo get injured because of her. Aluo had sacrificed so much for him. He couldn't become Aluo's burden. All of you, deserve to die. From Pei Sheng's throat came a roar that sounded like that of a trapped beast. His voice was hoarse, making it hard to hear what he was saying. Pharaoh Crane only felt that the suppressed man's aura suddenly rose. He didn't take it to heart. He just moved the sword closer to the man's neck. However, as soon as he moved, a bam sound was heard. The man's body suddenly exploded with a surge of raging energy. The thick, profound energy was like a spider web as it spread in the air. The majestic and powerful energy swept up a slight hurricane. Bam! Pharaoh Crane's body was suddenly repelled by the sudden burst of profound energy. Chapter 37:18. His entire body was emitting a dense, profound light. The surrounding black-robed men and Pharaoh he were all injured by that profound ray. What's going on? Pharaoh he's body was sent flying, and with a somersault in midair he crashed onto a building. He clutched his chest as he spat out a mouthful of blood. Wasn't that lad without the strength to even truss a chicken? How did he suddenly become so powerful? It was really uncanny. The commotion over here made Three Nether's expression turn extremely cold and solemn. Ghost Girl's reaction was extremely fast. The moment she sensed the change in Pei Sheng's aura, her cold and gloomy eyes were filled with an eerie chill. Following that, she was like an arrow leaving the bow as she charged towards Yiqing Luo's direction. And on Yiqing Luo's side indeed. At the moment when Pei Sheng resisted, Yiqing Luo swiftly flipped her hand as she clasped her wrist, which was attacking towards her face. Tightly, her 5 fingers clenched tightly. A kacha sound was heard. Xiao Yulu's wrist broke in response. Yiqing Luo's speed was extremely fast. It was almost in a blink of an eye. After Pei Sheng broke free from the restraint, her entire body started to revolve a majestic profound energy which contained an earth-shattering energy, stirring up the surrounding air as layers of clear and crystalline qi waves appeared. Swiftly counterattacking towards Xiao Yulu. Xiao Yulu's face turned pale as black qi filled the space between her brows. As though her entire face was shrouded in black qi. It made her face, which was as beautiful as a flower and as beautiful as jade, look sinister and treacherous. Yiqing Luo's counterattack made Xiao Yulu's complacent expression freeze on her face. Without Pharaoh he making use of Pei Sheng to balance Yiqing Luo. She was totally not Yiqing Luo's opponent, who was in a rage. Suddenly Xiao Yulu's eyes flashed as she saw a certain spot. Her pupils, which were filled with black qi, suddenly surged with waves after waves of turbulent evil qi. Yiqing Luo's long and narrow eyes suddenly grew longer as though she had reacted to something. She swiftly turned sideways. But no matter how fast her reaction was, she was still a step too late. That sinister sneer on Ghost Girl's face was already nearing. At the instant when she turned sideways, Xiao Yulu also received Yunu's signal and raised her hand to attack Yiqing Luo. One at the front and one at the back, the two sides attacked from both sides. Yiqing Luo had nowhere to hide. Yunu's red lips curled into a perfect arc as she gave a tender smile. Yiqing Luo, you're still defeated in my hands after all. Her voice was soft and gentle. However, his attacks were so swift and fierce that it caused people's hearts to tremble. An earth-shattering momentum exploded in the air. Yiqing Luo only felt a bone-piercing chill rising from her spine. Her mind worked quickly. It was too late for him to use his footwork to escape. All she could do was... He dodged one attack and endured the other. If she had to choose, she would definitely choose to avoid Yunu's attack. However, she had just been hit by Xiao Yulu's palm wind, and her internal organs were still in a damaged state. If he took another palm strike, I'm afraid her 5 viscera and 6 bowels would rupture. Both of them were as fast as lightning, totally not giving Yiqing Luo any time to think. Yiqing Luo's pupils contracted slightly. She pursed her lips tightly and could only choose the most beneficial method for herself. Old man Song, protect my heart. Yiqing Luo said this in her heart. Her body had already swiftly turned towards Yunu, meeting against Yunu's attack. Yiqing Luo's back was exposed in front of Xiao Yulu. Xiao Yulu's eyes flashed past a gloomy smile. But just as Xiao Yulu used all her strength to take Yiqing Luo's life, suddenly, a gust of gloomy cold wind fluttered and enveloped her palm. Chapter 37:19. No. It wasn't just a surge of energy. Xiao Yulu sensed in horror that when the cold wind blew over, and a majestic and vigorous energy was rapidly approaching. Violent howling. Xiao Yulu could even see the entrance to hell opening up towards her. No. She didn't want to die. Xiao Yulu was terrified. She wanted to retract her hands which had already attacked. However, the coldness seemed to have frozen her hands and body, making her unable to move at all. At this moment Xiao Yulu finally understood earlier. Yiqing Luo knew that danger was approaching. But she could only stand on the spot, passively waiting for the pain to descend. The only difference was Yiqing Luo was being coerced, standing there to suffer without any resistance. Whereas she wanted to hide but had no strength to hide. A miserable shriek came out from Xiao Yulu's mouth. Xiao Yulu's body suddenly flew backwards, crashing heavily onto the ground. She could even hear the sound of her bones breaking when her body crashed onto the ground. Xiao Yulu's entire face was twisted. Her wide-opened eyes were filled with unconcealable fear. And Xiao Yulu was overwhelmed with shock. But someone's heart skipped a beat, as various emotions of sweetness and astonishment spread in her heart. After asking Old Man Tsong to protect her heart meridians, Yiqing Luo originally wanted to forcefully receive Xiao Yulu's attack. However, at the most critical moment, she only felt her waist suddenly tightened. Tightly. A strong and powerful force tightly hugged her waist. Both her feet were in the air as she was brought into a warm embrace. The elegant sandalwood fragrance seeped into her nostrils. It instantly soothed the restlessness and uneasiness in her heart. Yiqing Luo's heart was instantly lifted. Even her charming eyes were slightly opened in disbelief. It's you. She heard Ghost Girl's panicked voice. Following that was the sound of Ghost Girl escaping in the direction of the other two nethers. Yiqing Luo was buried in that person's embrace, so she couldn't see the situation. But she could clearly hear the sound of the air ripple in the air. The sound of Ghost Girl escaping had just started when it suddenly stopped, as though she was intercepted in the middle. Indeed, at the next instance Yiqing Luo heard a painful moan. Yiqing Luo snuggled into that man's arms as she popped out her little head. Ghost Girl was suspended in the air, kicking her legs repeatedly. Her body and neck were tightly bound by an invisible force. Yunu's face turned pale as she opened her mouth and eyes wide, desperately looking towards Yiqing Luo's direction, hoping to plead for leniency. Meanwhile, a ray of purple profound light shot out from Dark Girl's neck. As the purple light circulated, it enveloped the azure dragon. In an instant the black fog around the azure dragon dissipated. Then the purple profound light shot towards the half of the head that had swallowed Shiju. Purple light flashed. Shiju's small body was faintly discernible. After the azure dragon broke free, it immediately rushed towards White Fong's severed head. The dragon eyes nervously stared at the faintly discernible Shiju. Roar. Shiju's small voice sounded normal and didn't seem to be injured. Yiqing Luo's suspenseful heart was finally suppressed. Her long, curly eyelashes fluttered. Her fingers, which were pressed on the chest of the person who was hugging her, unconsciously curled up. That person's chest was boiling hot and the rhythmic feeling of his heartbeat was like a drum, beating heavily on her palm. Chapter 37:20. Between her brows, there was a burning sense of warmth and tenderness. She seemed to be confirming something but also seemed to be in a dream. Cautiously he raised his eyes and looked at that person's face. Under the sky full of flying sand and blood, the man's peerlessly handsome face was still as outstanding as ever. His purple robe billowed, his black hair scattered on his shoulders. The dancing hurricane floated his black hair. The handsome face that could almost captivate one's soul was reflected in the young girl's pupils at close range. The man's eyes were filled with a smile. His peach blossom eyes were full of pampering for the young girl. Their eyes met, as if even the air was seeping with sweetness. Yiqing Luo's pupils, under the man's pampering gaze, dilated little by little. Her eyelashes were gradually stained with moisture. Her beautiful face was like a peach blossom in March, floating on a cloud. Ah Xian. The young girl's soft voice was choked with emotion. her arms tightly wrapped around the man's neck. Smelling the man's scent. Feeling the man's warmth. As if this was the only way to confirm that he had really appeared in front of her. Not in the spiritual state. Not an illusion. But the real him. The man's arms wrapped around her slender waist, his thin lips slightly hooked, gently falling on her hair. A low and magnetic voice came out of his mouth. Yes, it's me. Zhou Xian. Yiqing Luo's arms tightened, completely bringing her delicate body into his arms. She had never thought that Zhou Xian would actually appear in Without Embroiling City. And appear in front of her. Obviously, when they were in the Spirit Devourer formation, his spirit body had been affected. They had agreed that she would go to Without Shadow City to look for him. Why did he come to Without Shadow City alone? Then his body. Could it take it? This thought made Yiqing Luo's heart clench. She suddenly pulled the distance between the two of them and looked up at him carefully. Ah, Xian, are you all right? The man's pampering gaze seemed to be able to squeeze water out of it. Just a glance. Her heart softened and melted. He stared at her face, smiled and shook his head. Don't worry, you value my body so much, how can I let you worry? Yiqing Luo looked at him without blinking. She seemed to want to see it in his eyes. He wanted to see if his words were true or false. It was just that he was watching and watching. Under the man's gentle smiling gaze. That soft spot in Yiqing Luo's heart felt as though it had been hit hard by something. Tears welled up in the corner of her eyes. Don't cry. His voice was gentle and he sounded a little panicked. His broad and warm fingers covered the corners of her eyes. His slender fingers wiped away the tears at the corner of her eyes. He comforted her in a low voice. I'm really fine. Don't cry. My heart hurts when I see you cry. It was better if the man didn't speak. As soon as he spoke, Yiqing Luo's eyes widened as tears started to flow down uncontrollably. She suddenly plunged into his arms, grabbed his clothes and said with a sobbing voice, Fool! Why did he have to force himself? How can I not know about your body's condition? Stay in Shadow City and recuperate your body and wait for me to look for you, all right? She choked with sobs as her tears flowed non-stop. Why are you still acting tough in front of me? Don't cry. The man's voice became even softer. Hot lips replaced the fingers fell on her eyes. Chapter 37:21. For you I've never felt forced. Zhou Xian cupped the young lady's face with both hands. The two of them exchanged glances. His gaze was gentle and loving as he explained dotingly, You're in trouble and if I'm not around, how will you be able to recuperate in peace? His fingers gently brushed past the stray hairs on her cheek and tucked it behind her ear as he continued, Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Yiqing Luo's pink lips pursed tightly. Her tears were still uncontrollable. Her eyes widened as she stared fiercely at Zhou Xian, her eyes filled with rebuke. Zhou Xian's lips curled as he lowered his head and kissed her lips, appeasing the young lady's belly full of displeasure. His lips were very hot. The scorching heat seemed as though it was going to melt her. The familiar scent and sweetness intertwined. Yiqing Luo had no strength to resist, nor was she willing to resist. Zhou Xian's appearance made the entire auction's people and monsters all stopped what they were doing. Pairs of gazes converged onto Zhou Xian in unison. Everyone only saw the moment the man appeared. He pulled Yiqing Luo into his arms, while he raised his palm, as though he had just flicked it in the air. Immediately after, everything in the surroundings were restrained by an invisible force. Ghost Girl was restrained. The evil qi which trapped the green dragon was purified. Even White Fang, who had swallowed Shiju, was also forced out of his mouth. What kind of power was this? It was so powerful that he just moved his hand and easily solved the predicament in front of him. The man was treacherous and devilish, like an Asura from hell, holding the power of life and death. Everyone's heart couldn't help but tremble. But what made everyone shocked was that man who was like an Asura killing god faced Yiqing Luo. His entire person seemed to be plated with a layer of gentle light. As though in his eyes, there was only Yiqing Luo alone. That deep affection. It was filled with love. But this kind of tenderness and pampering appeared on this man. There was no sense of incompatibility at all. Just like for someone as bloodthirsty as him, the gentleness when facing Yiqing Luo was perfectly justified. Yiqing Luo. Suddenly, in this treacherous and sweet atmosphere, An icy cold voice broke the atmosphere at this moment. It also called back everyone's will. Even without seeing the owner of the voice, one could feel the coldness in the tone. Hearing the sound, Xiao Yulu, who was lying on the ground with all the bones in her body shattered to the point that she could not get up, suddenly turned her head around. She remembered that when she felt the power of the purple-robed man in front of her had trapped her, she felt a chill run down her spine. He sensed the power of another person. Was it this person? Who could it be? Why were there so many people appearing to save that slut Yiqing Luo? When Xiao Yulu looked over, it was a man with a cold appearance like an iceberg. His temperament was as cold as ice, and even his eyes were like ice shards. However, he was wearing a long robe that looked like raging flames. The bright red color added a touch of liveliness to the man's expressionless face. Xiao Yulu's pupils shrank. He recognized it. This red-robed man. Wasn't he the person in the private room of the Red Clarity Pavilion? In other words, this person was from the Red Clarity Pavilion. Hearing Zhu Wuxian's cold voice, the young lady who was immersed in the joy of charging with her beloved man, finally regained her senses. Her cheeks instantly flushed red. Chapter 37:22. But her actions were quickly stopped by Zhou Xian. A slightly cold, jealous voice came close to Yiqing Luo's ears. Why is he here? Yiqing Luo's petite body stiffened. He's here to take part in the auction. Before this, I don't know anything. If a certain overlord's vinegar jar was overturned, the consequences were simply too severe. Oh. The man's ending tone rose, not knowing if he believed Yiqing Luo's words or not. But the man's dangerous tone told Yiqing Luo. This matter was not over yet. Yiqing Luo wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Everything about her man was good. It was this sea of vinegar which had a little bit of terror. Don't bother about him first, you're here. Cat and the rest are here too? Yiqing Luo coughed lightly as she immediately changed the topic. Zhou Xian's peripheral vision shot a glance at the expressionless Zhu Wuxia who was standing not too far away. His thin lips curled slightly as the hand which was encircled around Yiqing Luo's waist suddenly tightened. His tall figure moved slightly, blocking in front of Yiqing Luo, blocking Zhu Wuxian's vision. Without waiting for Yiqing Luo to speak, his eyes drooped as he whispered into her ear. They're all here, they're very worried about you. Yiqing Luo's eyes lit up slightly, but following that she revealed a worried expression. How did you guys come in? Wasn't the auction hall sealed by an array formation? No one should be able to enter and no one should be able to leave? Everyone is already in this array. If we can't get out, wouldn't we be trapped here? You don't believe me? Zhou Xian's slender fingers pinched her nose as he gently pinched it, his eyes filled with adoration. Yiqing Luo pursed her lips. I'm very satisfied that you're able to stay by my side and let me see you. I'm worried about your body. Since I'm here, naturally I won't let you worry. His hand slid to her cheek as he gently pinched it. Don't think that I'm so weak. Yiqing Luo looked at him fixedly as the tears which she had finally stopped started flowing again. She bit her lower lip hard. Her arms hugged his waist tightly as she buried her head in his arms. All right, I believe you. So, for the sake of me who is so worried about you, I absolutely cannot let myself get hurt. Zhou Xian's thin lips curled up slightly as he raised his hand and stroked her hair, comforting her in a warm voice. Zhu Wuxian looked expressionlessly at the scene before him. He watched as the girl threw herself into the man's arms. A sweet smile appeared on the girl's face. Looking at the young girl's face, it was filled with happiness. His heart felt as if it was being pierced by countless needles. Yiqing Luo had obviously heard his voice. She would shyly look up at him from the man's arms. Clearly, there was already a shadow of him in her eyes. However, in the next instant, without any hesitation, she threw herself back into the man's arms. That decisiveness, that clear cut. It seemed to be telling him in this way. In this life, the only person she would choose was that man. The man named Zhou Xian. That man who, even when Yiqing Luo was in a coma, was still lingering in her mouth, calling out incessantly. She knew. Just now when Zhou Xian struck out, he also appeared to save her. Disregarding the agreement with the secluded palace, just because he wasn't willing to see her get hurt. But in the end he was still a step too late. Just like how he had promised her in the future. But after she grew up, he appeared in front of her a step too late. Chapter 37-23. It was destined that he was one step later than Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian slowly shut his icy cold eyes. A sorrowful emotion started to spread around him. But no matter how painful and unbearable his heart was, the expression on his face was so cold. It was as if nothing could affect his emotions and expression. Death God Castle's Castle Lord. When Yuji saw Zhou Xian, his expression changed slightly. Why are you here? He seemed to have thought of something as he speedily looked towards Yiqing Luo's direction. You? Zhou Xian suddenly opened his eyes. His sinister gaze was as cold as frost. It swept past Yuji faintly. Like December's ice brushed past Yuji's body. Yuji shuddered as the remaining words were stuck in his throat. Yuhan's eyes were slightly red as green veins popped out on her forehead. Death God Castle's Castle Lord. Although revered and you are no longer working together, but now that you've appeared here and disrupted Revered's plans as a former comrade, isn't it a little inexcusable? Yuhan's questioning didn't get any response from Zhou Xian. Yuhan looked at Yuji, who was being held in midair, struggling less and less as she continued anxiously. Previously you've already spoiled Revered's plans. If you continue to interfere in this matter, then don't blame Revered for not taking into consideration the relationship between the both of you. But no matter what Yuhan said, Zhou Xian didn't even give her a glance. But this noise made Yiqing Luo notice it. She heard Yuhan's words and looked at Zhou Xian as her slender brows creased slightly. Zhou Xian had really broken off the collaboration with the mastermind of Nether Palace? Previously she had intentionally mentioned to him to give up on the collaboration with Nether Palace. At that time, didn't he have that intention? Zhou Xian had many things he wanted to do. He needed something from Nether Palace to achieve his own motive. So Yiqing Luo didn't insist. But now Zhou Xian had really broken off the collaboration with Nether Palace. Then had his motive been achieved? Death God Castle's Castle Lord. Yuhan wanted to continue saying something, but she was interrupted by a sweet voice. The person is in Xian's hands. What are you talking about with Zhou Xian? Yuhan was stunned as she looked at Yiqing Luo. Yiqing Luo nestled in Zhou Xian's arms as her lips curled up slightly as she gave a faint smile. This matter has nothing to do with Zhou Xian. Even if you talk till your mouth breaks, it's of no use. Yuhan's face was ashen. Release Yu. Wouldn't it be very embarrassing for Xian to release him just because you said so? Yiqing Luo raised her brows as her eyes curved into a crescent smile. Moreover, why should I let go of the prey that I've already gotten my hands on? Yiqing Luo's voice paused. Suddenly, the smile on his face became extremely cold. Even the voice that came out of his mouth was so cold that it made people shiver. She restrained my friends, threatened me, and tried to devour my battle pets. Do you think I would let her go? Yuhan's face instantly turned pale. His body was on the verge of collapsing. Whereas when Yu heard Yiqing Luo's words, her struggles became even more intense. But Yiqing Luo started to display her face-changing skills again. Her pink lips curled up and a brilliant smile bloomed on her face. Her voice also became gentler by a few notches. If you really want to save this beloved woman of yours, then I can be merciful and spare her life. She brushed away the stray hair on her cheeks as she laughed lightly. Release the auction's array and let us leave this array safely. Chapter 37-24. Impossible. Yuji shouted sternly. Yuhan clenched her fists tightly as her scarlet eyes stared at him. I can't let anything happen to Yu. Whether she dies or not has nothing to do with me. Yuji's expression was cold. Moreover, I don't want to die. He shot a cold glance at Yunu's direction as he said word by word. Don't forget what punishment we will receive if we fail this mission. Yuhan's face suddenly turned pale. Yuji continued. I have no opinion if you want to die with her, but don't think of sacrificing me to fulfill your love. Yuji's words ended and his expression instantly turned vicious. He waved his hand as he shouted sternly, Go. Sweep those trash with the fastest speed. After the black-robed men received the order, they started to surge towards the various powerhouses cultivators in the auction. Boom. Profound energy that could topple mountains and overturn the seas suddenly surged. Various powerhouses cultivators thought that they were saved. But in the next instance they were devoured by those black-robed men. Yuhan's eyes were scarlet red as she held onto Yuji's wrist. Yuji laughed coldly as he shook off Yuhan's hand. If you want to die, then go ahead and die. He absolutely had to survive. Ah ah ah. Suddenly a painful shriek was heard. Yuhan's pupils constricted. He swiftly looked towards the direction where the sound came from. He saw that Yu, who was originally restrained in midair by an invisible force, her neck had been replaced by a pale white finger. Yu cried out in pain. But very quickly, all her voice was strangled in her throat. Yu. Yuhan's eyes widened as she looked at Yu, whose face was filled with pain as she screamed. Ugh. Yu stretched out her hand towards Yuhan as she pleaded for help. Yuhan wanted to rush forward. But her wrist was held by Yuji. Do you really want to die? Yuhan's eyes were red as she struggled to look at Yu's painful look, as though she didn't notice Yuji's obstruction. Since you've already made your choice, then this woman shall be our appetizer. Yiqing Luo smiled lightly as she looked at Yuhan. The corners of her lips curled up slightly. Her fingers that were clasped around Nethergirl's neck seemed to be casually resting on it. She then lowered her voice and said in a mocking tone, Your hearts are all black. Both of you are black. Why do you still need to talk about love? You're lying. Yu spat out a few words with difficulty. He loves me, he will definitely save me. Yiqing Luo raised her brows. Really? But why do I feel that he loves himself more than you? The expression on Ghost Girl's face became increasingly twisted and sinister. She hated Yiqing Luo's light and indifferent expression. Wasn't it because he had the protection of the Overlord? Didn't he just think that he had the so-called love? Heh. Who doesn't have love? Her Yuhan would never give up on her. Yu roared in her heart in a heart-rending manner. However, a certain part of his heart was filled with fear and unease, and it trembled intensely. She didn't know what she was panicking about. Or perhaps she had already guessed something but wasn't willing to admit it. Yiqing Luo sneered as she looked at Yuhan with a smile. On the account that you're in so much pain, I'll give you a chance to choose. The deal that I've mentioned, are you going to agree? Or not? Yuhan's scarlet eyes widened as the features on her face distorted. Chapter 37:25. She hadn't even finished her clamorous words. Suddenly Yuhan's wrist, which was held tightly, loosened. She heard Yuji's impatient voice. If you want to prove your love, then accompany her to die. At that moment Yuhan became quiet. Yiqing Luo laughed softly as she looked at Yu's twisted face and smiled. See, it's not that I don't want to give you a chance to prove your love, but what a pity. Yu's pupils dilated slowly. Her throat suddenly tightened, as though all her breathing was blocked in her throat. She didn't even have time to struggle. Following that, she felt a shapeless flow of air gushing into her internal organs, as though a sharp blade was cutting everything in her body. She struggled and twisted in pain, but there was no way to reduce the pain in her body. She moaned and even wanted to tear her skin apart, to expel the tearing pain in her body. Suddenly, her throat seemed to be pulled by some gas. She cried out in pain. Ah! She was in pain, venting. Her mouth kept on screaming Yuhan's name, not knowing when Yiqing Luo had let go of her. She floated in midair, screaming and struggling in pain. She couldn't take it. Her body wriggled as she looked at Yuhan. Save me. Yuhan, save me. But that man who kept saying that he loved her. However, when his eyes met hers, he slowly moved his head away. Yuhan didn't move. He had no intention to save her. Yuji didn't hold him back at all. It was him who had already given up on her. Yu's screams gradually stopped. In her mind, the words which Yiqing Luo said to her ears inexplicably rang. Your hearts are all black. Why do you need to talk about love? That's right. All black. They were all selfish. The so-called talk about love, the so-called pledge of eternal love. Totally not suitable for people like them. So painful. So painful. Yu couldn't tell if it was Yuhan's giving up which made her heart ache, or the flow of air in her internal organs which made her feel pain. Just as the pain was eroding her, causing her to lose focus. Suddenly, Ghost Girl felt her floating body being pulled into a warm embrace. That warmth seemed to ease the torturous pain in her body. Yu's heart tightened. Joy spread from the bottom of his heart. Yuhan. She knew it. Yuhan would never give up on her so easily. However, the moment she slowly lifted her gaze, his gaze landed on the figure. Her joyful expression froze on her face. It's you, Yu Nu spoke in a hoarse voice that was filled with surprise. The man who was holding her was dressed in a loose black robe that covered his entire body. Only from Yu Nu's angle could she see the man's face under the black robe. In particular, she could clearly see the man's red eyes. The man frowned, his black robe fluttering in the wind. It was as if he was suffering from some great pain. The dark maiden stared blankly at the man. He also saw it clearly. When the man was hugging her, he had to endure the corrosion of the surrounding barrier. That was the enchantment which Yi Qing Luo had set up. She wanted the people from the secluded palace, wanted the various powerhouses' cultivators to watch her die in agony. Actually, disregarded the corrosion of the enchantment and charged right in front of her. I'm sorry, I wasn't able to save you. The man's voice was filled with guilt as the hand which was hugging Yu Nu tightened. Yu Nu trembled. It was the pain in her body.